Most people that are trying to fix their posture are working on the wrong thing. Not because the advice they're following is bad, but because it's not aimed at them specifically. Face pulls, band pull aparts, posture correctors, you probably tried most of it, and it may have helped for a while, but sooner or later you found yourself back to where you were before. However, here's what nobody told you. Your posture is not breaking down where you think it is. There is either a weak link upstream or downstream, and until you find it, nothing is going to stick. Just like a fish that is swimming upstream, as soon as they stop swimming, they're going to find themselves back to where they were before. This video is not another routine or a reminder. It's how to identify your weak link, fix it, so you can stop backsliding and keep the correct posture without thought. This has taken me over 14 years to learn through grinding through pain, seeing doctor after specialist with no solution, and eventually have to learn it through the school of hard knocks. When I was 18 years old, I was heavily into bodybuilding, and I did a lot of chest dominant work with internal shoulder rotation and did not do enough external rotation. However, I didn't feel this weakness because I felt superhuman, like I could do almost anything at that point. And during a snowboard event, I went off this waterfall jump where it was about 60 feet, and it's been sunny for a few days. And so the packed snow was more like ice. And when I hit my shoulder and wiped out, I went tumbling down this hill. I had a lot of pain from that incident, but I didn't stop training. I kept grinding through pain, even though I should have. I was stubborn at that time. I didn't want to lose all my gains. But here's the thing, that incident wasn't the worst thing. It was the crack in my foundation, the lack of external rotation that ended up being a big problem. I was in trade school at the time and living in a dorm. However, I had to leave on medical leave because I couldn't even lift my plate of food with my shoulder pain was so significant. Eventually, I went to a physical therapist and they said I had some shoulder impingement due to my lack of external rotation. I was a good patient. I did all the mobility and strength exercises they gave me, and they got me back to functional where I didn't have any pain, but it wasn't optimal performance, which was at the level I was operating at in my life and in the gym. My mid back was so stiff that the chiropractor of mine, who was a former bodybuilder, could not even adjust it. And if it was ever loose enough for it to have a slight adjustment, it would pop back out almost immediately, at least that day. The more treatment that I received, the more my nervous system put up red flags and guarded my ability to move within ranges. My mid back became completely rounded where it could not extend. I had my neck protruding forward, which overloaded my traps that created more fatigue, and this worsened my posture, which resulted in even more increased pain. The cycle just continued over and over again. Here's something I want you to understand about pain. Pain is not the problem, pain is a signal. It is like smoke. It might show up somewhere, but the fire might be burning somewhere else entirely. Most people and most professionals focus on the smoke. They chase symptoms. They treat the location of pain and wonder why it keeps coming back. However, if you're only treating the smoke, you'll never find where the fire is burning. This is what was happening to me for 14 years. Every specialist I saw was treating the smoke. Not one looked for the fire, the cause that was pushing the first domino and setting the whole chain reaction in motion. I always had a suspicion that my shoulders were a limiting factor, and it's not like I didn't try to gain greater mobility. It was just like hitting a wall. The more I tried to gain range, the more guarding showed up, more stiff and tightness I had, which increased pain. So it wasn't until I learned how to train the nervous system properly, allowing it to trust the range, and I did this by building tolerance. After doing so, it was amazing how easy it was to extend the range and mobility in my shoulders and build strength on top of it. It was like the guards had their guard down and the gate just opened wide up and allowed me to externally rotate my shoulders. My mid back was able then to extend with an upright posture. Then my head was able to sit directly over my shoulders, which would decrease the fatigue and tightness in my traps, as well as bring down my neck pain. After that, posture held without effort. It became my body's natural resting state. It wasn't difficult anymore. This wasn't by building a stronger back. It was by finding the weak link in my posture, my shoulder mobility that I had been missing for 14 years. I am not an anomaly here. Most people have a weak link that they never have identified. And so they are chasing after the wrong thing. Although there might be many things that you need to fix, there is always the weakest link that dramatically holds you back more than the rest. Before we go any further, I mapped out all this for you, making it extremely easy inside of a free assessment called the Iron Body Assessment. The link will be in the description. Grab it and then we can walk through the rest of this video so you can identify your specific weak point. For myself as a bodybuilder, I heavily focused on my chest because I was a lightweight and I had a very difficult time building my chest. My back, my legs, these areas, genetically, I could get stronger and quicker. So that meant if I wanted to develop my chest, I needed to do a lot more pressing motions, and I did them, and I got a bigger chest in result of it. But I was lopsided because over time, I developed a bigger chest, but because I was out of balance with the amount of training I did on everything else, that's where a weak point started to develop. On top of that, I was into martial arts at that time and I did a lot of striking. So even though I did some rotational work in my training and even some lateral work, it was nothing compared to the forward pressing motions and the rounded shoulder positions that I put my shoulders in. Even when I was grappling in BJJ, I also was constantly wrapping my arms around other people trying to put a maneuver in certain positions. So this created a major gap in my training and exposed a weak link. And if you look at the patterns in your training, you can easily distinguish which ones you're missing, because even if you're not having problems now, it only takes one unexpected event, just like mine did, that will exponentially expose it and illuminate it where you can't ignore it anymore. And by then, it will be very difficult to fix afterwards. The second question is, what are you training outside of your hours in the gym? And I'm not talking about doing extra exercises at home, but by your lifestyle and what you do for work, you are training, because under the law of adaptation, your body becomes what you frequently do, for better or for worse. So if you're sitting 10 hours a day, you're training yourself to be better at sitting essentially. But this means that you're shortening your hip flexors, you're weakening your core. There are many components about this that will affect not only your training, but also your posture as well. For myself, I was a diesel tech and I worked on engines in trade school a lot. I also learned to weld, and so I was constantly looking at the table and I was holding a welding gun in a rounded back position for long 8-hour days. And I constantly did this work. Even when I was working on engines, I was cranking wrenches. And so I had all this internal rotation, not only in the gym, but also in my work, which exponentially made the problem even worse. The third question, you have to understand what is the range in your physiology and which of that range do you actually have access to. But not only have access to move in and out of that range, but actually control and are strong in the end ranges. How you can do this is when you get into the stretch position, can you contract the opposing muscle of the stretch muscle? If you can, then you have good mind-muscle connection and control in this position. Here's what most people and most professionals miss. When I finished my physical therapy for my shoulders, my impingement was gone, pain was gone, and the fire appeared to be out. But there was still burning coals beneath the surface, just waiting for their opportunity to catch fire again. In my experience, typically physical therapy only brings you back to functional. Rarely does it ever bring you back to optimal performance. And it's not always the doctor's fault. Most likely, it's always the insurance company and what they're willing to pay for. But in the end, the result is the same. You walk away feeling just good enough, and since pain is gone, you don't even realize that you are not fully restored. I was a good patient. I kept training my rotator cuffs, but my nervous system still had its guard up, still limiting my range. And each additional car accidents that I was in, it closed that range more and more. Nobody connected it to my back because it was not the site of the injury. However, it was the reason my back could fully never recover. Here's the principle I want you to take away from this. Most people only train for the range that they need. However, when an injury or a setback happens, your range will shrink. If you're only training at the minimal range required for yourself, well, now you are below it and you don't have access to the range that you actually need. But if you train beyond the range that you currently need, two things will happen. The first, you'll be more resilient because it will take more to limit you. And the second will be, even if you have a flare-up or a setback and you lose a little bit of range, you'll still have access to the range that matters. And I feel this for myself because if I ever have a back flare-up, I will not be as strong and I will be tighter. However, I will still be able to bend over and touch my toes. I'll still be able to bend over and tie my shoe, bend over and pick up a toy without squatting down. Before, if I had a back flare up, it would be hard for me to even reach past my knees. However, this is the difference between training for optimal function and training for minimum operating function. This is a wide angle systems check. Once you know where the weak points are, you can zoom in and go deeper on each individual component contributing to each limitation. We fix the weakest link first, then the next one. That's how you build a body of iron, one link at a time. Not just better posture, but a structure that will hold together when life knocks you off the tracks. And don't forget, if you haven't already, go get the Iron Body Assessment in the description. It will help you identify which is your weak link so that you can fix it, build a body of iron, a better posture that is a natural resting state instead of fighting against resistance, and help you live a higher quality of life. And in the next video, I'm gonna zoom in on the individual components so you know exactly how to fix them individually. And if you found some value in this video, hit the subscribe button.